Hello, fellow actors, writers, directors, and production crew. Welcome to Small Talk with Tony, the interview series where we get together with people in the biz to make small talk. I'm your host, the owner, chief storyteller, and the Tony behind Tony Video. Now, over the course of this series, we will hear stories and personal experiences from people just like you. So, let's make some small talk.
Actions always find a way to shine brighter than the things you say.
So, today's guest is the beautifully poised Bella Poynton. Bella is a local playwright with a PhD in theater performance studies from the University of Buffalo, as well as an MFA in playwriting from the Iowa Playwrights Workshop. She is an assistant professor at SUNY Oswego teaching theater history, criticism, and playwriting, and has had several of her works, including her plays, published along with scholarly articles. I've had the pleasure of working with Bella as an actor in one of her plays, The AI at Delphi, which was produced by First Look Buffalo. So will everyone please join me in giving our next guest a very warm welcome. Thank you, Bella, so much for taking the time for some small talk.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Well, it was a pleasure to work with you, my dear, and on one of your plays nonetheless, it was really cool to be a part of that experience and be a part of your process to see how plays get developed. Which is why I'm excited to have you on the show here today, because I'm sure there are plenty of people tuning in, playwrights and writers alike, that are curious to know more. So why don't you talk to us about what is it that made you want to be a playwright, and how did you get your start to the industry?
Yeah, so I went to acting school. I have a BFA in acting from Boston University, and I was writing plays kind of when I got there. When I was little, I was writing plays, and I can remember wanting to write things to perform when I was as young as like 12, because I recognized that plays existed, but I sort of wanted to control what it was that I was saying, right? So I wanted to write it myself, and so when I was like 12 or 13, I wrote a play that was done at like a youth group that I was a part of, and then I wrote a play when I was in my teenage years, when I was a later teen, and then I got into acting school because I didn't really understand or realize that like you could actually be a playwright, like that was like a career thing that you could do. I didn't understand that, so I decided that I was going to write a play, and but you know, when it came to school, I had to go to acting school if I was going to be involved with the theater. So I got to Boston University, and I had a really great mentor. His name was John Lipsky, the late great John Lipsky, and he was very encouraging. I would tell him like, "Oh, I'm writing a play," and he would be like, "Oh yes, you must continue writing this play." And I was like, "Well, it's just sort of like, it's not like a real thing. Like, I'm just sort of doing it for fun. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing." And he's like, you got to figure it out." And I was like, "Well, I don't, I don't really know. And like, I'm just, some, 18-year-old girl. I can't write a play." And he was like, "If you don't write it, I will." And that really pissed me off. So he knew exactly what to say to me to get me angry enough that I can't have him writing it. Like, I have to write my own play. So that motivated me to really start writing full-length plays, and I completed kind of my first serious full-length at Boston University. They produced it, then I wrote another one, they produced that one, they invited me back after I had graduated, and they did it at the Insight Arts Festival in New York City, and they were just wonderful to me. And if I had not had their support, I don't think I would have become a playwright. So having the mentorship of John Lipsky in the beginning, and then later on in my college career, I was actually mentored by Lydia Diamond, who is a fairly well-known Broadway playwright. She wrote Smart People and The Bluest Eye, the adaptation of The Bluest Eye. they were incredibly supportive. So having that mentorship is important.
Well, based on how you described it, it seems like there was two elements that helped you harness your potential as a playwright. And the first was just having the impulse, having that drive to create and to do. And then the other is having a mentor or somebody with experience to help you guide and focus that energy so that way you can manifest the talent. And I think it's super important to have mentors. I have mentors in my professional life as well as my personal life. And it's just great to be able to look up to somebody and also offer advice. So you were able to find and cultivate this talent. Talk to us about how you create your work and what do you maybe recommend to others trying to create theirs?
That the creative impulse, if you have the creative impulse to write, I would say that you really have to nurture it, because if it's there but you don't nurture it, it's going to disappear over time. So when I have an idea, I have tons of ideas. I usually don't sit down and write unless I've had that idea for a long time. So I let something sit and kind of marinate for at least 3 to 6 months, sometimes even longer. I will and if it like, it's like an earworm, right? It's like somebody kind of standing behind you being like, write me.
Do it, you won't. Do it. Just write it.
Now. And if it's still whispering to you like 6 months, 8 months, 10 months later, then it's probably a good idea. And you could probably sit down and start writing it. If it just kind of disappears on the wayside and you sort of forget about it, either it wasn't strong enough of an idea, or it just wasn't the right play for you to write, So for my work, I would say I think people in the area know me for science fiction work. And that is definitely something that I do. But really, I am a formalist. Like, I write things that are based in general realism, but they take place in another time in another place. So other time, other place. But beyond that, it's not like wildly abstract. Like, they're people, they have relationships, you can kind of understand those relationships. I'm not like writing The Bald Soprano, which is, like a silly, well, actually it's not silly, it's very profound, but it's super abstract. But I'm not writing in that way. I'm writing in general realism, other time, other place. And some of the tools that really help me is thinking through imagery. I think a lot through imagery, so I'll think about a play and I'll think, what are the kind of main theatrical images throughout this play? So if I had to think of like 5 main images or 3 main theatrical images on like stage pictures to help me guide throughout the play, what would the first one be? The beginning one, the one at the beginning of the play, the central image of the play, and then the final image of the play. And that sort of helps me track. So for example, you were in my play AI at Delphi, and you did an amazing job. And
well, I had wonderful writing to work with. So thank you.
Thank you. One of the central images of that play was that the AI is, when she gets her human body, she approaches Kalos Daedalus, who's the scientist who kind of made the body for her, and they confront each other, and she sort of shows him the body with her kind of animating it. And that moment of them seeing each other, him seeing her animated and her showing herself animated, was one of the central images in the play for me. And I actually think that it wound up being that way. Like, that was one of the kind of highly theatrical moments. And then, for example, another play of mine that maybe some people remember, some time ago I had a play called Speed of Light that was done at Road Less Traveled, and one of the main images of that play is at the very, very end, the final image it's there's drugs in that play, and one of the characters. Is
Disclaimer: don't do drugs. Eat your green
There's
vegetables,
drugs.
kids.
And don't take drugs. And she's sort of immune to the drug because she's been taking it in small doses for so long, but the people around her are not, and they've taken too much and they have died. But she's super high on the drug and she's like kind of bugged out of her mind. And the last image is like her with her friends around her and they're dead and she's kind of alive, like super, super high, like looking out into the future, being like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And that's a very highly theatrical image, and that's kind of the final image of the play. So if you can think in theatrical images, like what's a like a high stakes, highly theatrical, highly engaging image, stage picture that I can create at the beginning, middle, and end of the piece, and then you just sort of string them together. So that's one of the ways that I like to work.
Well, everybody has their own style, and when you look at the other facets, like the acting, directing, and producing side of things, they have to have some element of writing in order for them to do their job, I think. You know, for example, when you talked about that moment where my character and Iz, come together, I felt that moment, but I felt it as a writer. Like when I read it for the first time, I could feel it. I understood what you were going for just based on reading the words. But then as an actor, being able to perform it, I got to experience it. And, it was great. Melinda was great to work with. She's such a strong performer. And she made it very easy for me to fall in love with her. But, the funny thing is I felt like I was there with you when you wrote it for the first time as I was reading it. And it was just a really cool experience. But as a writer myself, I always ask, how do I want the audience to feel? And when you write something, no matter how long it takes, if you still have that feeling and others consistently feel the same way when reading your work, I think that's a sign of having a good dramatic moment. So taking a look at all the things that you've learned over the years, how would you describe your process as a writer, and what do you think works and doesn't work?
Well, in terms of process, I would say that the great, and nobody wants to hear this, but I think that in terms of process, what you have to understand is that you got to rewrite. So you're not going to be able to write the great American play in your rough draft. Like, it's just not going to happen. You might write a great rough draft, and you might have a lot of really great ideas in that rough draft, but it's not going to be, what it needs to be. I went to the University of Iowa, and there were some serious heavy hitters at the University of Iowa in terms of the playwriting program. So it's a well-known playwriting program, and like people would just like tell you the truth. like really,
well, I'm sure they do
tell you the truth. And I won't name names or anything, but just name people looking at you and being like, nobody wants to read your shitty play. Rewrite it. You know what I mean? And you really do have something to prove. And I feel that rewriting and being able to recognize that while you may have excellent ideas and there's excellent moments in your rough draft, that rough draft is rough. And you have to rewrite it, and you have to be able to listen to feedback and filter through feedback and process it and digest it and go back into your draft and do serious structural rewrites. It's super scary. It's super scary. I teach playwriting at SUNY Oswego, and I'm about to go in and teach an intermediate playwriting class, and a huge part of it is going to be rewriting. And people are terrified of rewriting because they're afraid that they're going to lose that amazing feeling that they had when they were first writing. And you have to help the playwright sort of get over that, right click, save this date of the document, and then go into the new document and rip it apart and really rewrite. So for me, the process is all about rewriting, not being afraid to rewrite. I mean, you were in rehearsal with me. I was rewriting stuff. right? Like constantly, to the point that, the stage management is like, tone it down, please.
Yeah, okay, well, yeah, we're doing a new play, starting from scratch. You got a week to do it.
Yeah. And then I would say that my other piece of advice to people who really want to start writing and they're like, how do I do it? What do I don't know. My advice is read plays, right? Read far and wide. Ask your local theater scholar, what are the 100 plays that I should read? And they'll be excited about it. First of all, they'll be like, oh my gosh. And then they'll give you a list and you should read those plays. I try to read all the new stuff that's coming out, all the stuff that's been nominated for the Pulitzer. You have to read really far and wide. And why? Because you have to, I think, this is just me, it's really important for a playwright to have an expansive idea of what theater can do, right? Theater can do a lot of stuff, right? I remember being in acting school, being young, like 18, and we read a play called Roosters, and I can't remember who wrote the play, but it was called Roosters, and it was about this family, and I think they they owned a farm, and like on that farm there was cockfighting, which is like, illegal, but they made money. I think that's what the play was about. And at the end of it, there was like a daughter in the play, and she was very against it, and she was very religious, and she didn't approve of the violence, and there was like other stories in the play. And then at the end of the play, I'll never forget it, the very end, she starts to levitate, the girl who's super religious, as if she's like becoming a saint. And I remember having the thought, you can do that? You can do that? Like all of a sudden you can just have someone levitate because in your version of the story they like have transcended and have become some sort of saintly figure. So the reason why you should read far and wide and read Beckett and read Sophie Treadwell and read Ionesco and read all of the great writers and read Pinter and all of the writers who aren't necessarily post-war realism, which is what we usually see in the theater, post-war realism, so that you have a better understanding of what is possible, right? Because so much is possible. And we often see post-war realism. Sometimes we see magic realism, which is really amazing, right? But if you read widely, you start to get an idea of, wow, I can do that, I can do this, I can do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that's really, I would say, the way to sort of start to wrap your head around, what does it mean to be a writer? What does it mean to find a style? And I guess that's just something that I have felt has been an important part of my development for a very long time.
Yeah, it's important to be able to define and articulate your process. So, in the context of writing, I think a good indicator for when something works or what good writing is when you plan for something and then the viewer responds how you had planned for. I think it's the simplest way to break it down. But let's say they don't respond the way you intend, or maybe multiple people have the same criticism of one section of your work. Well, then that's the place I want to start. That's where I divert my attention to. But I'm always balancing feedback with the purpose of why I wrote the piece in the first place, because everyone's got their own opinion. But in your experiences reading vast amount of plays, how do you distinguish between good work, and where do you make adjustments in your own work?
So I was recently talking to a student, and the student said to me, we had read a play, and I won't say what play it is because that'll kind of, yeah, I'm not going to say. And the student came to me and they said, I get it now that we've talked about the play for 2 days in class, but when I initially saw it, it just looked like gibberish, right? Like, so how do you know, Dr. Bella? How do you know if something is great when you read it? Right? Because I'm like giving them this classic play and telling them that it's great, and they're like, what is she talking about? Like, what are you talking about? And I think the I'm also a historian, right? I also teach theater history. And so I think one of the things that is important as you're looking at a piece is, how does it relate to the moment that we're in right now? And what's going on in terms of form and what's going on in terms of content. And if the playwright is like experimenting with form and also experimenting with content, and also what they're writing is kind of like fitting into like the political zeitgeist and the cultural moment, you may have something on your hands that's really extraordinary. You know, I was teaching on Friday, and I was teaching Dr. Faustus by Marlowe. And of course they're like, "Oh my God, yawn," right? But but I said, no, wait. Let's go to the scene where he calls the devil up from hell, right? And I said, who wants to read this section where he calls the devil up from hell? And I said, I need a good actor. So that this young student raises their hand. And they start reading, right? And it's like this Latin incantation, right? Oh, and it's like this really spooky Latin incantation. And I said, really get into it. And so the actor's like really, really getting into this spooky Latin incantation. And at the end of it, everybody's just like, right? Like, because it's spooky. It's like, yeah. And it's interesting because, you know that movie The Ring?
Yes.
Like,
No, I
yeah.
hate that movie so much. It
Right?
scares the crap out of me, and I hate watching little girls with very messed up hair.
Well, because you get scared because you've also watched the movie, and you're like looking away. You're like, I don't want to watch the 7-minute movie. So what Marlowe did that was so fascinating is that he had people in the audience terrified, thinking that the actor on stage was actually calling up a demon from hell. He was experimenting with form and content, right? He was doing kind of sacrilegious things in this time period when all of a sudden, it was the Renaissance, right? Science everywhere, right? We were saying that science is the way to know the world, not religion. And so he writes this amazing play where somebody calls the devil on stage, like in front of you, right? And everybody's like, oh, people, women fainting in the theater, people being like, I rebuke that in the name of Jesus Christ, right? So you're really making people scared. And that's what I mean by form meeting content, and he pushing back against kind of the status quo. That kind of stuff is brilliant. And over time, as you read more material, and you know a little bit more about the canon of dramatic literature, you start to be able to pick out the great works. But, it takes time. You got to sit down and read the plays. And that takes a while. But, it's fun, too. If you love the theater, it's also fun.
Well, it's like a treasure hunt. You get the fun, exciting moments, and you get the simple and potentially boring moments from time to time. But not only is it really cool to see and learn about your process, but to see your mindset about, why you do what you do, why you create the things you create. So thank you for sharing. And since you are a published playwright with several published plays, I'm pretty sure there are several people that would like to know how that works. So, what do you think is the best way to get your work published, and also the possibility of getting a literary agent?
Right. So, my advice to playwrights is not to focus on getting published, is to focus on production. Get your plays produced as much as possible. This is very hard. So, it's very hard to get a play produced, especially a second time. That second production is always harder than the first production. And so I would suggest get a first production of your play. when you get that first production, rewrite like mad. Rewrite that play. Go to the rehearsals. Rewrite. Make it better. Make it better. Get that second production. And even in the second production, keep rewriting. Make that play as perfect as you can make it. Be sending plays out. Be sending things out for submission for production, right? Read about theater companies. Write letters to artistic directors. Submit as much as you can. Now, it's very, very hard. Pre-pandemic, there were so many more opportunities to send your plays out. But there still are opportunities. You can develop your work still. There are lots of great development conferences that you should be submitting your work to. Then, once you have those productions under your belt, once you have several productions under your belt and some good reviews, then you can try to seek publication. If you publish the play too quickly, it won't really do anything for the play. Because if no one knows about the play or has seen the production, then no one is going to choose it to produce. So, for example, sorry, I have a play that has been produced more than any of my other plays, and that particular play, it took me a very, very long time to get that play published. So, I had like 5, 6, 7 productions of it, and I would send it out, and people would be like, "Oh, not quite yet," right? And then I would have to wait. So, how did I get my plays published by Broadway Play Publishing and Concord? I sent them, right? So I was a finalist for the Sam French Off-Broadway Festival twice, which put me in sort of a conversational relationship with Concord. So every year I would send them an email that said, my play Medusa Undone had 2 productions this year. I'd really love for you to consider it for publication. And for several years, they said no. But I would continue pushing that play for production. And then finally, one year I said, well, it had another production this year. I would love if you would consider it for publication. And finally they say yes. So you have to be prepared. They're not going to say yes immediately. It's just not going to happen, right? And with my other publications, I have some producer, well, not producers, but some publishers just won't like a particular play of yours, right? I have a play that some publishers, they're just not interested in it. They're interested in this one, but not that one for whatever reason. So you you have to be able to accept that rejection, but keep pushing that play for production. And then the following year or so, you send it again. My play had another production this year. I was able to do even more rewrites on it. I'd love if you would consider it for upcoming publication. And eventually, over time, you'll get a publication here or there. But you have to have those productions under the belt. And I know a lot of times people are like, "Oh, it just happened out of nowhere." It didn't. It didn't happen out of nowhere. I've been pushing plays for publication for a long, long time, and getting rejection, and then trying again the following year. So that's how that works.
Well, no matter how you look at it, whatever industry that you're in, if you want something to be sold, you have to show its value. And take a look at your track record. You've written many plays. You've produced several of them, and some of those productions had multiple productions, and then you got published on some of those. So you were able to show value in your work, in the producing side first, and then you did that enough times so that way a business would look at your work being produced, and they would look at you being a viable thing to produce. Mm-hmm. Right? So with all the good reviews that you got and all the productions you've had, you have proven that you are worth the investment because other people made that investment. So, whether you're writing a play about sci-fi stuff or tech or stuff or something where I fall in love with technology or inanimate objects, which wouldn't be the first time.
Yes,
And
there
I'm
you
really
go.
really good at it, by the way. It's they were able to conform to you whether they like your stuff or not because you have this ability to sell. You have product that people have bought into, and that's really important to know as a creative, because when you look at movies and shows nowadays, businesses want a sure thing that's going to sell. So as a creator, you have to be able to provide them that, with your own artistic vision.
Yeah.
But if you remain consistent with what you do, the chances of you being produced are just going to increase. So for those that maybe have an issue getting produced or their work out there, what are some misconceptions about writing you wish to clarify or just make light of so that people can start being successful?
Yeah, I would say some misconceptions are that, well, I would like to say that I don't think you have to write every day. I think that that's something that I don't really even know who started that. But I think I don't think it's useful for a lot of people, right? I definitely don't write every day. I have there are periods of time will go by when I just don't have it in me, or I've just put up a show and I need to take some time off, or I'm confused about a piece and I need to kind of step away for a little while. Um, you know, I do have in the back of my mind, like, I'm a playwright. I'm going to take a little time off and then I'm going to get back to it. But I don't think you need to write every day. I think that a lot of things count as writing: organizing, outlining, thinking about the play, thinking about the work, taking notes on the work. That all counts as writing. I also think that one of the misconceptions is, well, I don't know if it's a misconception, but what I would say is that when you do write your first draft, write that first draft quickly. Get it out. Don't let it go on for months and months and months and months or years. That's not good. It's a play. Get that first draft out. And then go back, make a pot of chili, get a bunch of people on Zoom and read that play out loud. It's going to be terrible, and you will have to sit through it, and you will take notes, and then you'll have something that you can craft into a better draft. I really would suggest not obsessing over one project. If a play isn't working, you've been at it for a few months, leave it alone, write something else. Right? And when you're writing drafts, try to get the first draft out quickly. Like I mentioned before, your first draft is not going to be good. Learn how to rewrite. Learn how to take feedback. You are not Tom Stoppard. You aren't. Okay? Like, I don't get it. Like, there's people who are like, I don't need to rewrite. I don't. What? Like, it's crazy to me. So,
Just calm down.
Like, and it happens all the time. It happens all the time, right? And you're thinking, like, wait, I didn't know that you had 4 Tonys. Like, where are they? Like, you know what I mean? So, you got to learn how to rewrite. You got to learn how to take the feedback. And look, I'm not saying take every single note, because actually you can ruin your play that way. But you have to listen and be like, oh, okay, I know what that person is referring to. Oh, yeah, that makes sense to me. Oh, that note doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to put a little X on that one. But this one does. I'm going to star that. That one does. I'm going to star that. And whatever makes sense to you, do that rewriting. It is a hard process, but that is going to separate the adults from the children, the men from the boys, the girls from the women, right? So that is what I would impart. And then the final thing I would say is, and this is, I think, maybe the most important thing. Don't try to write like another writer. try to be the writer that you are. And I learned this when I was at the University of Iowa getting my MFA in playwriting. And the very short story goes like this. When I got there, I was like 24 or 25 and I was scared out of my mind. I'm like sitting there, I'm like, are you sure that I don't understand how am I here? And I'm sitting there and I'm scared, right? And you got to sign up for your workshop. And so I didn't sign up in the beginning of the semester. I signed up way towards the end of the semester so that I could sit and listen to the material that was being workshopped at the Iowa Playwrights Workshop, so that I knew I'd be like, okay, well, I'm gonna listen to the kind of plays that are in the room and try to write a play like that. So I listened for the whole semester almost, and I was working on something, and then it was my turn, and I was like, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna bring in something, and it's gonna be just like the rest of the workshop, right? It's gonna be just like they want it to be. So I bring in this play. And it's read, right? And then one of the things that happens is that after you have your workshop, you have a meeting with your advisor directly after the workshop, or usually the next day or later that week, to talk about how the workshop went. And so I'm sitting there with my advisor, the great Art Baraka, and he goes to me, so what are you doing? What happened? And I was like, what do you mean?
What was me? What could you have meant? Oh, dear me.
Right? and he was like, well, it seems like, how did you think it went? Right? And he, in so many words, told me like, I sort of know what you're doing. You're trying to emulate the other playwrights in the room. And I said to him genuinely, like, isn't that what you want me to do? And he was like, no. He was like, we took you because you sent us 2 plays. I read them and I liked them. And I want you to write those kind of plays. We don't have a playwright like you in the workshop. That's why we accepted you. Do you get it now?
Light bulb.
Right? Yeah. And I was like, what? You're yelling? Like, it was shocking. It was absolutely shocking. And so then the following, I was like, what? Like, support? Are you kidding me? Oh my God. So the following semester, I wrote the Aurora Project, which is still, the most produced play I have. And because I was given the permission to write about the things that I cared about, that were important to me. So whatever is important to you as a writer, write about that. Don't try to be, don't try to be Tom Stoppard. Don't try to be another playwright. Don't try to emulate other people. You have a style of your own and things that are important to you to write about. Write about those things, because that's what you're going to do well. And so that's, I would say, like my kind of parting advice.
Well, that was good. I mean, it was very helpful, and I have to say you have many pearls of wisdom. So thank you for sharing your insight. And, the fact that you teach, I'm sure it's going to be very exciting to some individuals. So whoever wants to learn from you, I'm sure they'll want to know what's next and how can people continue to follow your journey.
So my website, bellapoynton.com, you can follow me there. You can look up my plays on Concord Theatrical and Broadway Play Publishing. What else? I mean, I think that's probably it. I'm on Instagram, Bella Poynton. I'm the only one. So, please follow. Tidbits of playwriting, humor, and nuggets of information from time to time. So thank you so much. This was super fun. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that concludes another episode of Small Talk. I want to thank my guest Bella for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. You can check out all of our latest episodes at tonyvideo.com/smalltalk. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram, where you can get the latest news. I'll see you next time.
And what the people choose ain't really up to you. Actions always find a way to shine brighter than the things you say.